Hey folks, hope you all are doing well. I'm Karan Bandal from Econosite, your weekly wrap on economic news from India and around the world. So let's get started with a European firm. A French multinational hones in on India. Schneider Electric, headquartered in France, specializes in digital automation and energy management. As I understand it, let's say your country generates electricity through the use of solar, wind, hydropower, nuclear, and coal. Schneider has the technology where it can provide you with a grid where all these different power sources can plug into, and the end customer will get an uninterrupted electricity supply at the optimum cost. With 2022 revenues at roughly 34 billion euros, the company is a major player in the energy technology sector and provides smart energy solutions for homes, buildings, data centers, infrastructure, and industries. Schneider is betting big on India's growth as it has created one of its 4 hubs in India. Company aims to leverage plenty of young talent with strong digital skills here in India. Schneider currently has 30 manufacturing units in India and employs 34,500 people, which is its largest headcount globally. And they are building 5 new factories in India. The rationale being India's electricity consumption per capita is expected to increase 8 times to 10,000 kilowatt hours by 2047. Schneider aims to be a major part of this growth. For context, look at this World Bank data from 2014. US leads in electricity consumption per capita at around 13,000 kilowatt hours. India's consumption was 1/16th of that at around 800 kilowatt hours then. Currently, India consumes 1200 kilowatt hour per capita. You can see where different countries and regions stand in line with their development journey based on 2014 data available with the World Bank. Electricity may be the best vector for decarbonization when generated through non-fossil fuel sources. India has a long runway for growth in this space and the enabling factors to achieve that growth. And you see why Schneider is betting big on India. Next, we have a defense-related update. BrahMos exports to Southeast Asia. India-based defense company BrahMos Aerospace is a joint venture between India and Russia. This company makes state-of-the-art hypersonic missiles that can be launched from sea, land, and air. These missiles form a significant chunk of India's firepower in service. BrahMos clinched its first foreign deal last year when Philippines signed on to import $375 million worth of shore-based anti-ship missiles from India. Now BrahMos is in protracted negotiations with Indonesia for a similar deal that can be worth between $200 to $350 million. It is expected that the company will land a follow-on order from Philippines of around $300 million more, reposing faith in this product as one of the most lethal missile systems in the world. These Southeast Asian nations are acquiring this capability to counter China's growing maritime presence in the surrounding areas. From manufacturing standpoint, BrahMos missiles do depend on Russian parts and raw material, but the percentage of India's local input has gone up to over 70% from around 15% at the start of the venture. These export deals are a big boost for India's defense manufacturing capabilities and its export ambitions. Moving on to banking, are Indian banks safe amidst global banking turmoil? We saw in just the last 2 weeks Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in the US collapse. Both were mid-sized banks. Signature Bank with $110 billion in assets and Silicon Valley Bank with $209 billion in assets. Then we saw Credit Suisse, a major European bank, go down. There is still some uneasiness in the US markets regarding the health of mid-sized US banks since these banks are subject to relatively lax regulations. So what about India's banks? How are they positioned? Let's look at some indicators and metrics related to the health of the banking sector. Number 1, capital to risk weighted assets ratio, CRA ratio. For banks, the money that they lend out is considered as an asset. Car loan, home loan, personal loan is a liability for an individual who takes on this debt, but for the bank who issues it, these are their assets. RBI requires banks to maintain a minimum CRA ratio of 9% on an ongoing basis. Roughly speaking, let's say Bank X lends out 100 rupees in car loans. That is, they have 100 rupees in assets. Then they must maintain at least 9 rupees in capital, satisfying RBI's 9% CRA ratio requirement. As per RBI's latest data from December 2022, CRA ratio of Indian banks stood at 16%, well above the mandate. Number 2, non-performing assets to total advances ratio or NPAs. These are bad loans where the businesses or entities to whom the money was lent to by the banks have either failed or are now unable to pay the bank back. This was a huge problem during Congress-led UPA's second term, that is between 2009 and 14, and BJP-led NDA's first term, that is 2014 onwards. Indian banks' NPAs have been on a declining trend since 2018, falling to 5% by September 2022 and are expected to drop further to 4.9% by September 2023. NPAs are elevated even at this level but are moving in the right direction. For reference, let's pick a random sample of well-managed economies. NPAs in the banking sector of the US, Finland, UK and China are below 2%. Number 3, mark-to-market losses on bonds portfolio. Banking regulations require that banks buy some safe assets in the form of government bonds. There is an inverse relationship between the value of government bonds and central banks' interest rates. If the rates go up, value of bonds go down. One of the pressures faced by US banks is the sharp rise in interest rates. US Fed has raised rates by 450 basis points in just 1 year, leading to mark-to-market massive losses on US banks' bond holdings. Whereas India's Monetary Policy Committee in the same time has raised rates by a smaller step, 250 basis points. Thus, less mark-to-market losses for Indian banks' bond portfolio. To add to this, Indian banks have a high proportion of retail deposits, making them more resilient. To compare, Silicon Valley Bank that collapsed had 90+% non-retail deposits. Indian banks are comfortable when it comes to liquidity as well. Their coverage ratio stands at 135.6%, well above the 100% requirement. What about deposit insurance? US banks through FDIC insure bank deposits up to $250,000. Indian banks insure deposits only up to $6,100 roughly. While $6,100 may seem small, it fully insures 98% of deposit accounts. By contrast, deposits of the top 10 banks in the US were insured in the range of 38.4 to 66%. All in all, Indian lenders look fairly resilient for now. In summary, India maintains its attractiveness as an investment destination as evident by Schneider's India plan in the near term. India's entry in the club of nations that exports highly sophisticated defense systems means India can use this incoming capital to further invest in domestic defense research and manufacturing capacity. Finally, banking sector drives a nation's economic growth by ensuring liquidity, capital availability and lending to value-added enterprises. A healthy banking sector in India should, to some extent, insulate India from a slowing global economy. I hope you enjoyed this week's wrap. I'll speak with you again next week. Until then, take care.